Hello there. In these videos I've been diving deep into the world of terrible sitcoms, looking at the ones that consistently rank at the very bottom of different worst of lists. I've spent a lot of time searching through old newspaper articles and online reviews to find the absolute worst offenders. Well, get ready for the grand finale. In this video we're counting down the final 3 sitcoms, the absolute worst of the worst, and one of these shows features an actor who has already made a previous appearance on this list of terrible sitcoms. Buckle up because it's about to get really bad.
Number 3.
Bottle Boys was originally written for Jim Davidson, who instead made Home James, the more successful spin-off from Up the Elephant and Round the Castle. So it was given to Robin Asquith, who played the randy football-loving milkman. Television executives thought he would be perfect, as he'd spent about 10 years acting with his trousers round his ankles, starring in the Confessions films. Produced by London Weekend Television for ITV, this series gained a reputation as one of the worst British sitcoms ever produced. Bottle Boys is a couple of rungs further up, or down depending on how you look, the innuendo ladder. We're probably all aware of the Carry On films and their constant double entendres. Well, in the Bottle Boys sex-obsessed world, literally everything anyone says to is immediately taken to mean something dirty. You can't even sit on a stool without Asquith loudly announcing he's going to get his leg over. Incidentally, Bottle Boys writer Vince Powell was responsible for some of the jokes in Carry On Emmanuel, the penultimate and critically panned Carry On film. Despite his background, Asquith looked thoroughly embarrassed to be saddled with dialogue that revolved around dated and unfunny racial, ethnic and gender stereotypes. After all, it was 1984, not 1974. Bottle Boys was reputedly despised by comedy executives at ITV. Series creator Vince Powell made no mention of Bottle Boys in his autobiography From Rags to Gags, the memoirs of a comedy writer. Al Needham interviewed Robin Asquith for the Nottingham magazine Left Line. Needham asked, "So have there been any times in your career when you thought to yourself, oh, I'm not going to be too proud of this film in 20 years' time?" Asquith said, "John Burt wanted me to do a sitcom when he was at LWT, and I was foisted with a script that Jim Davidson knocked back. I tried to do my best with it, but political correctness arrived. We had to tone everything down, and everyone hated me for it. Still got 10 million viewers a week, though." MSN Entertainment's Lorna Cooper called Bottle Boys groan-inducing. "We're not exactly in TV heaven here." Mike Lewison, writing in the Radio Times Guide to Comedy, observed that ITV sitcoms had often plumbed the depths, but this was the limit. He put Bottle Boys at the bottom of his list of the 20 worst ever British sitcoms. The Daily Telegraph critic Ben Lawrence described it as wretched, also naming Bottle Boys as the worst British sitcom ever made. One viewer suggested, if you like Robin Asquith and early 70s bawdy comedy, stick with his Confessions films. The series ran for 2 seasons, with a 6-episode run starting in September 1984 and a 7-episode run from July 1985. There has never been a commercial DVD release.
Equal number 1.
There isn't a sitcom in second place, as the bottom 2 shows have tied. Considering ITV had a bad reputation for sitcoms, the 2 equal first shows are both BBC productions. Big Top starred Amanda Holden as a circus ring mistress of the struggling circus maestro. We are told that the circus is not in the least bit rubbish, it just has a hard time attracting audiences, but they are genuinely entertained when they see the show. That's not the reaction of the critics watching Big Top. It's not the worst setting for a sitcom. The writer Daniel Peake had been to a circus and realised that there was a very small team of people doing absolutely everything, performing the show, selling the programmes and then packing up the tent to move to the next site. They all live in caravans, so they can't escape one another. When talking to Susie McIntosh at Big Bear Films, Daniel says she knew an acrobat and the circus theme began. They had a great start with some big names in the cast. John Thompson, Ruth Maddock, Tony Robinson, and it was directed by Jeff Posner. It was even broadcast entirely in December 2009, so it was likely to capitalise on the Christmas period television offerings. You might think that the Radio Times, an instrument of the BBC, would give a glowing report about its own shows. Wrong. In the Radio Times, published ahead of the first broadcast, Alison Graham tore lumps out of the show. Hear that, she wrote? It's the sound of arthritic gags trying to pull themselves up from the bottom of a deep barrel. Welcome to Big Top. As you feel the last of your life force drain away and you decide 8-year-olds will love Big Top, it spoils everything with an off-colour routine about sleeping with a health and safety inspector in return for a good report. And if anyone thinks that it will pass safely over the heads of tinies, then I beg to differ. Oh, not good, and the press were not at all kind. Keith Watson in the Metro thought it was like the 1970s all over again, which was not a compliment. He said Big Top made the last of the summer wine look raw and edgy. It was as though League of Gentlemen had never happened, another tent peg in the coffin of British sitcoms. In 2013, Carolyn Westbrook of the Metro would put Big Top in her list of 10 sitcoms even worse than The Right Way. She said it was unsurprisingly consigned to the sitcom dustbin after just one series. Tom Sutcliffe, writing in The Independent, said, "You'll need something to entertain you while it's on, unless you've got a dog that's overdue for combing or some socks to pair up." He thought that it was just an excuse for Amanda Holden to wear hot pants and black stockings nearly all the time. Sam Wollaston of The Guardian commented that the jokes were so obvious that he invented a game whereby he'd pause the show after the setup and ask his girlfriend to guess the punchline. The Times critic Caitlin Moran referred to Holden's previous television role in Wild at Heart on ITV1, trying to save a trapped giraffe, saying Holden's return is in no less baffling setup as Lizzie the Circus Maestro. She runs a circus of what appear to be educationally subnormal friends and relations. She was not impressed that there's a comedy foreigner who gets his words mixed up, and Thompson has to deliver lines such as "we need to catch those escaped ferrets" without the audience knowing. Only adds to the viewer's liverish sense of doom. Michael Deacon in the Daily Telegraph described it as unfunny and outdated, writing that the cast weren't so much playing characters as reading aloud from a dog-eared joke book for half an hour. The Observer's Phil Hogan wanted to be positive. The Heidi High fan in me wanted to like Big Top, the unashamedly 70s style sitcom, but it was just unashamedly lame. I couldn't believe Tony Robinson spent all those years of training on Blackadder and those archaeology programmes for this. Daily Mirror television critic Jim Shelley included the series on his list of the top 20 TV flops, describing it as mind-blowingly awful. Robert Epstein, writing in The Independent, thought the BBC was trying to recreate a feeling of warmth with this throwback of a comedy, but he revised his opinion. To judge by her hot pants and hunting jacket, Amanda Holden must be the ringmistress of a circus, whose acts we never see, but which sounds, from behind the scenes where the action takes place, frankly rubbish, despite an all-star cast. And finally, in 2016, Digital Spy put Big Top in its list of the 11 worst sitcoms of all time at the number 1 position. The harsh criticism that it received and the likelihood that it would be axed after one series was not all bad news. The BBC had announced the intention to close BBC Six Music, to circumvent instructions given to Six Music presenters that they should not discuss on air the planned closure of the station. Richard Bacon used Big Top as a codename on his show. He frequently voiced his strong objection to the BBC's plans to cancel Big Top and encouraged listeners to do the same. BBC trustees rejected the plans to close the station in July 2010. Of course, this is the second time Amanda Holden has appeared on this list as the star of a show. She also starred in Mad About Alice in 13th place. Big Top was not recommissioned for a second series and was formally cancelled by the BBC in February 2010. I've not been able to find any commercially released DVD.
Equal number 1.
The second equal first place goes to The Right Way, often used as a yardstick against which all other bad sitcoms were measured. The home and work life of the director of the health and safety department at a local authority does not sound a very funny setup for a sitcom. Until you add that it's written by Ben Elton, the alternative stand-up comic who went on to write for Spitting Image, The Young Ones, Blackadder, Mr. Bean and so many other top-rated shows. But I'm just the messenger. All of the sharply pointed barbs here are from the journalists. But it was terrible. David Haig starred as the Health and Safety Director, Mr. Gerald Wright. Obsessive and inept are his key contributions, from how to load the dishwasher properly to being unable to operate the taps in the gents' loo. Sort of a talking Mr. Bean. In the opening episode on the 23rd of April 2013 did not impress BBC bosses, with an average audience of 2.16 million, below BBC One's average of 2.28 million for the time slot for the previous 12 months. Citizen Khan, another BBC One sitcom in the same slot the previous year, opened with an audience of 3.41 million. The Guardian's Stuart Heritage had seen an advanced screening and so managed to get the boot in first with his headline, "The Right Way, the sitcom that proves Ben Elton is no longer remotely funny." He could probably have left it there, but went on to write a further 700 words. How is it possible this dire new comedy was written by the same person behind Blackadder and The Young Ones? It did not end there. One of the characters is nominally a lesbian, solely because the word lesbian is apparently quite funny now. It's a shamelessly broad, deliberately lowest common denominator sitcom aimed squarely at the perpetually outraged heart of Middle England. So he's put the knife in now to twist it. The Right Way behaves as if the world hasn't moved on a jot since The Thin Blue Line was last on TV, and The Thin Blue Line felt as if it was 20 years older than it actually was. And to finish, Elton doesn't need the money. His musical, We Will Rock You, is so impossibly successful that the man probably spends his days splashing around inside a Scrooge McDuck-style cash vault. The only feasible reason for him to write The Right Way is to prove that he's still got it, and judging by the results, will finally teach him that he hasn't. That probably reduced the potential viewers by a few 100,000. Jake Wallace-Simons in The Telegraph said the script was devoid of any trace of originality or indeed any trace of genuine comedy. Jake did admit there were a couple of funny lines, but on the whole, however, the clouds of failure remained firmly knitted. The Independent's Tom Sutcliffe said, like Dr. Frankenstein, Ben Elton appears to have created his new sitcom by exhuming the body parts of different comedies and stitching them together. The result is an odd, lurching affair, sometimes funny but occasionally so groan-inducing that you want to gather a mob with torches and pitchforks. Tom had a bit of sympathy for the Gerald Wright character, arguing the toss with the stroppy shop assistants over queuing priority and struggling to contain himself when he becomes entangled in the unforgiving logic of his own rules. He felt the monster created by Elton needed a bit more surgery before being released into the world. Bruce Dassault compared The Right Way to the parody fictional sitcom When the Whistle Blows in Ricky Gervais's Extras. He wrote, "It's easy to knock Elton because of his involvement with We Will Rock You, but that does not explain quite how bad The Right Way is. It stinks from nose to tail." Keith Watson, writing in the Metro, felt Elton took a very wrong turn on the comedy front. It was unmitigated horror and a crime against comedy. Considering Ben Elton's Thatcher-bashing alternative comedy days, who knew he would end up writing a sitcom that makes Mrs. Brown's Boys look like cutting-edge satire? In Elton's defence, the Metro's Caroline Westbrook said, "The show may go down in history as an unfortunate blip on the career of a man who gave the world The Young Ones, then at least Elton can take comfort in the fact that he's not the only one to have seen a sitcom fail miserably." The Times said the series' fatal flaw was its lead character's inconsistency. He's not a character at all, but a succession of unusable stand-up routines from a middle-aged and politically disorientated comedian. The Guardian's John Crace accused Elton of hitting a new low with unfunny slapstick, tired old rants and a few well-telegraphed knob gags. He said lame doesn't begin to describe this car crash of a comedy that involved actors standing around awkwardly doing their best at damage limitation. There was no point in them even trying to make the script convincing. He felt that The Right Way is a sitcom that would have looked and felt badly dated in the 1970s. Time Out suggested that maybe it's too easy to knock Ben Elton these days, but God, this is diabolical. making The Thin Blue Line and Blessed look like comic masterpieces by comparison. The article continued, fortunately there's a clap-happy studio audience to disguise the absence of a single good joke. Wordplay around erection and knob is about as creative as it gets. Never have Blackadder and The Young Ones seem so long ago. Even a week after the first episode aired, Tom Phillips in the New Statesman was still asking, how did Ben Elton's The Right Way get it so wrong? Although he admitted that some shows need a chance to find their feet, pointing out that Friends, Men Behaving Badly and Blackadder all had to make significant changes before they became popular. However, he had a caveat. Unless it's the right way, of course, because it's utter crap. He substantiated this by saying, the second episode landed with a sickly thud on our televisions last night and might have somehow managed to be worse than the first episode. A shockingly lazy calamity of a show. Its many superficial failures serve only as a light and fluffy distraction from the vast, gaping flaws at its core. He explains, in what is clearly intended to be the series' signature comic riff, each episode features a scene in which Wright constructs a series of tortuous acronyms on a whiteboard, unwittingly spelling out a rude phrase. There's just nothing funny left to say. Penis. As if all the mauling from the press wasn't enough, within 6 weeks of the final episode being aired, BBC controller of comedy commissioning, Shane Allen, revealed that Ben Elton's The Right Way was among the sitcoms being axed. Shane Allen described the decision to end the series as having been made in conjunction with Ben Elton. He set out to write an old-fashioned, mainstream comedy, and he did exactly that. Ben Elton was really bruised by the reception. He felt, if people aren't loving this, I'm not going to put myself through it again. Shane added, it didn't catch fire with the audience, but it wasn't what you would call a flop. Over the course of a week, it had 3.5 to 4 million viewers. We're not going to bring back The Right Way, but I'd give him another chance on something else if I felt right and it was compelling. The Guardian reported that Allen noted people are scared of the glare of being involved in mainstream comedy. They see what happened to The Right Way or Vicious. They see that things can get slaughtered quite quickly. Comedy provokes massive reactions. Ben Elton himself later reflected on the series during an interview for BBC Radio 2's Steve Wright in the Afternoon on the 20th of November 2014. Elton commented that sometimes you can pull it out of the hat and sometimes you can't. Blackadder was initially drubbed and set to be cancelled, and that went on to become one of British comedy greats. With this one, it just never really found its niche. I'd originally envisaged it as a bit more of an alternative BBC Two jobby, but I'm not sure Auntie and I were ever totally in tune with each other's view on what it was going to be. In hindsight, I don't think it was packaged very well, maybe not titled very well. Nobody knew quite what it was. A shame, but that's the business we're in. The Right Way was never repeated on BBC or anywhere else as far as I can see, and does not appear to have been released on DVD. The Right Way became the sitcom that all of the bad sitcoms were measured against. I hope you enjoyed this look at the UK's 15 worst rated sitcoms on television. It was not my decision. The final scores were calculated from the combined scores of the shows listed in various sitcom surveys. There are 8 BBC shows and 7 ITV shows in this list of worst sitcoms, so quite fair, totally unbiased. I'm sure you have your own least favourite sitcoms you think should be on the list. Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to check out my other videos for more television related content. Thanks for watching.